Welcome to the Focus 3 podcast with Tim Kight and Urban Meyer. Coach, welcome back.
Good to see you, my friend.
This is loving this conversation, man. The last one, number 50, was a blast and didn't want to stop it, but we needed to from a time perspective. But let's pick up where we left off. Now, the big message for this episode is going to be culture is not what you proclaim. It's built by what you practice, promote, and permit. Every organization, every team out there is trying to build culture, and they have a culture. And the question is, how do you go about it? And I know that's a gigantic topic for you. You've always put a priority on culture, correct?
I'm glad we stopped there because I want to make this clear because I've been, and this I really learned in 2013 when we first started sitting down because everybody proclaims a culture, and I actually work with athletic teams right now. And I would ask the coach, say, what's your culture? And they usually give me a mission statement, and it's very well thought out. It's very politically correct. It's very, service, character, which are all very important things. But I'm saying, now what are the sound bites of the athletes that are permeated, that are constantly shooting through their brain? And is that to me is a culture. Mm-hmm. To me, a culture is not something you type on the wall and it sounds very good. It's usually way too long. And is it a soundbite that everybody within the organization, that they can regurgitate it to you? And that's always my question to the coach. Say, wait a minute now. I didn't ask for a mission statement. I didn't say, what's the feel good? That you maybe turn into the AD or president, which sounds good. AD and presidents are important, not more important than the athletes, student athletes. Or in a corporate America, what are your people? Do they really know what that mission statement says, or what are the sound bites that are constantly shooting through your brain in those moments of those critical times?
I always say this, that when I'm working with a company and when they're developing their culture playbook, I say when the people walk into the building, when people walk onto the shop floor, when they're in front of a customer and they're working with a teammate, what do you want them believing? What message comes into their mind about the cultural standards that they need to follow? And I think the key is this: it has to be clear, concise, and compelling. Clear, easy to understand. Concise is a soundbite, and compelling has to touch the heart, which we'll get into.
Wow.
Yeah. So you don't build culture based on what you proclaim. You build culture based on what you practice, promote, and permit. Let's go to work. So Urban, 2013 season, Ohio State football closes out with 2 losses. And I know you well enough to know that's painful. I mean, that is, you don't like to lose. But at the same time, you're, by your own acknowledgement, you're discovering some things about yourself as a leader, doing that self-evaluation, which is a very powerful inner journey that great leaders go through. And I think, by the way, on that topic, that if you're not willing to do the inner work, if a leader's not willing to go deep inside himself or herself, they're going to struggle to be effective on the outside. So I do, and I have great respect and have been a part of your inner journey, and we're still on our inner journeys together. So it's a privilege to be a part of that with you. And thank you for entrusting me to do that with you. It's an awesome thing. But so let's go back to 2014, which is the winter. So the season ends. It's actually 2014 Orange Bowl game. We lose to Clemson. And now it's the winter. Now you're prepping for the next season. How did you process the 2 losses? How did you evaluate your team and yourself? What happened in the winter of 2014? There's a huge time of self-reflection. What did you do?
Well, it's a blessing and a curse, the 2 things you discussed. First, the hatred of losing, the fear of losing is real. And that's not just, I'm not the lone wolf with that. The fear of losing throughout my career overcame the thrill of victory many times, and that's not healthy all the time, but it is what it is.
Sorry to interrupt. I want to put a mark on that. I don't want to talk about that today, but let's make that a topic for a future episode, is talk about defeating fear.
Yeah. The second thing you mentioned was the skill of self-evaluation. That's not always healthy either. A lot of times I see these incredible people have, great longevity, and because they're not too hard on themselves. That's something that a blessing and a curse. I've never been one to say that's your fault. That's your fault. I've always been this is my fault. We lost a game. What did I do wrong? And I go about working extremely hard to try to fix that issue so I don't do it again. And that's exactly what happened in 2013. We won 24 straight games. I have a hard time remembering those. I can tell you every play in those losses. Mm-hmm. And, if you go back and we're playing our rival in Ann Arbor, and it's a game back and forth. We can't stop them. They can't stop us.
This is the end of 2013.
Yeah, we are in a fight in the rival stadium. And we're undefeated at the time. We won 23 straight games. And the fourth quarter, we just can't stop them. And it's a 42. We score to go ahead 42 to whatever.
41. 42-41.
Well, it's 42-35.
Okay, got it. Yep.
They take it down the field. I almost told Tom Herman, our offense coordinator, I said, let's milk this. I don't want to give him the ball back. So I was going to take a knee on the 1 yard line and try to run the clock down. And Tom convinced me, he said, no, we need to score now because we couldn't play around. We score too fast. I look at the clock. There's a minute or so left. We ain't stopped them all day. They go right down the field and score. Brady Hoke is the coach, and I think he did the right thing. We were undefeated at the time, one of the top-ranked teams in America, and they go for two.
So the score's Ohio State 42.
Team up
north 41.
They go for two with seconds left in the game. We call timeout right before they run the play to kind of figure out what they're doing. And Tyvis Powell steps in front of a ball, intercepts a pass. We win the game. Closing seconds of the game. And I just remember my son was on the sideline, just one of those great moments. And we lose to Clemson. We once again don't play good defense, and we get beat. So we lose our last two games. Now it's time to get to work. And one of the first things I did is I was feeling a lot of pressure from Buckeye Nation, from nationally, from locally, even administrative at times, and then also myself saying, do I make a change? And there's two different styles of leadership. I speak to this quite often. I'm not saying it's always correct. I just have always been one of those ones. I'm not a big elimination guy. I very rarely have fired one guy, where I'm going to fire people. I've always taken the approach to saying, I hired this person. It's my job to fix it. I'm not sure that's always, that's a great debate. However, I've always tried to create somewhat of a family atmosphere where, you work really hard. If there's a shortcoming, it's my job as a leader to help you fix that shortcoming. And we got a lot of heat on defense. We weren't playing very good. And so the normal in college athletics, you fire everybody on defense, bring new staff in. I had a coach named Luke Fickle, who's the head coach of Cincinnati, one of my closest friends, and elite family, Amy, his wife, and a Buckeye, he played at Ohio State. Excellent coach. But his players weren't playing very well. Defense wasn't playing very well. We had to overhaul some things. However, I reached that point where I was recruiting in South Florida. I'll never forget this.
This is the winter of 2014.
January 14. Mm-hmm. And I'm driving to St. Thomas Aquinas in South Florida, and I just feel I have to make a decision because other coaches are getting hired, recruiting. Everybody wants to know, what am I going to do?
There's a window.
I was driving by myself, and I pulled over. On the freeway, cars buzzing by me, and I pulled as far over as I could. I said, I jammed in a park. I prayed. I just meditated there, and I thought. I asked for guidance. What do? I have to make a decision. And it didn't take long. It was very clear. Firing was not a choice. However, what was a choice is let's find out the problem. Firing and elimination takes very little time and effort. Obviously, it's very painful for some people. Other people, it's not painful at all. Finding out an issue is awful. It takes an enormous amount of time. It takes a very enormous amount of pain to find, dig in because you're self-evaluating, you're evaluating people, you're digging into it. But I made that decision that day on the freeway that I'm going to keep Coach Fickle and the defense staff, and we're going to go to work. And we're going to so I got back after the season. I interviewed every player on our team. I wanted to find out the issues. I didn't know this was the issue, but we're going to talk about it in a section. And we had a trust issue, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and we went to work.
I remember you coming to me and sharing that with me. It was a cold, snowy February morning in your office, and you and I had this conversation. And you said your interviews, players and coaches, that we hadn't gone to the level of trust that we needed to. So we went back to this fundamental principle. Okay, what is our system for building trust?
That's it.
And then what work do we have to do with the system to build it?
Okay, now let's go back. It's not the first time I had trust issues, with myself or with a member of my staff or player, whatever it was. This is the first time, though, that we systematized it.
Yep.
And we went to work with a very clear system. And if you remember, we didn't even bring it to the players.
Yep.
This is all about staff development. And I want to say at least 4 or 5 times we met as a staff with you leading the charge and me interjecting. And once again, I give our staff credit. Now, you're talking about grown men that have coached for a long time. It's time to drop the egos. It's time to acknowledge that we do have an issue. It's time to self-evaluate, which is very painful. And it's time to get better.
Yeah.
And that's going to take a large amount of work.
So I want to set this up because there's another element to this that we did that's as important as the trust piece. And this is relevant for everyone who listens to our podcast because of the business and educators and other coaches that are a part of our audience. And that is that in addition to identifying that there was a trust issue, we also identified there was a clarity of culture issue. Right. And it was interesting because, and I remember when I first said to you, I think we need to do a better job of communicating the culture, you kind of got a little defensive and you pushed back a little bit. And I said, no, Urban, you communicate the culture really clearly all the time. But the other coaches don't communicate it as frequently and as clearly and as passionately as you do. They believe in it, but they were never required to be elite culture builders with their group. It was like that was what Urban Meyer does. That's your, like your legacy. You're the ultimate culture guy. And so we identified that if we're going to be great, culture has to be built in small units, not just in the whole team. And I remember telling you, I've heard you communicate your 3 core beliefs. And I said, there's no confusion. In fact, we all know what they are. And I had to fly to Las Vegas to do a keynote for a client. And I said, I showed you a template, belief, behavior, outcome. And I said, I know what you believe in all those things, so I'm going to write it on the plane and I'm going to send it to you when I get to Vegas. And I remember in 20 minutes I wrote the whole thing down. And the 3 core beliefs of Urban Meyer, Ohio State football are relentless effort, competitive excellence, power of the unit. Now, these aren't concepts or ideas. These aren't platitudes. These are core beliefs that have to move from the head to the heart. Core meaning Latin for heart, and it's on your heart. And here's the great challenge of leadership is to get people to believe at the heart level. Not the head level, the heart level. Core beliefs literally mean beliefs that reside on the heart. That's what that, and it was on your heart. And so I said, we got to get it from your heart to the hearts of the assistant coaches, and then from the assistant coaches' hearts to the hearts of our players. And that was the strategy that we adopted. So those 2 things, communicate the culture, teach them how to build trust, and go to each coach and say, it's your job to do that in your unit. And I remember you sitting up and you even said, okay, we're changing the name. We're not calling them assistant coaches anymore.
Unit leaders.
We'll call them unit leaders.
So around the same time as you bring this up, I was knee-deep in a book called Lone Survivor. And Marcus Luttrell, a SEAL team member, a horrific event in American history we lost some incredible men in that war that we were experiencing. And he survived. In Lone Survivor, I was reading a book, the movie came out, and I was enamored with it, like I usually am with military examples. And I'll never forget on page 15, it struck a chord with me because we were having the same dialogue about clarity of purpose. And I'm reading this book, and today I reference it all the time. The clarity, Marcus Luttrell quotes, the clarity of purpose was inspirational. And I met Marcus Luttrell. He actually came to speak to our team, and I asked him that question, what do you mean by this? And I think I knew the answer, and this all ties into the culture blueprint, is that the United States Navy, the SEALs, are the best trained men in the world. Now, you can argue Ranger, SEAL, Green Beret. I'm just saying special forces in general. They're the best trained. You can't say there's another country that trains their people better and I know this. I've studied this, and that's a fact. So they're the highest trained, most trained people in the world. It's a demotivator when you don't give them clarity of purpose. And so I started thinking, wait a minute, now we have an Ohio State football program, our off-season training led by Mickey Marotti, the way we train, the way we coach, the way we work, I consider us the most trained football players in America, in the world. If not, then you got other issues. You got to worry about your training. You're not training them very good. However, I believe that they're that well trained. However, is their purpose clear? Mm-hmm. Am I being perfectly clear? And it tied together. And what Marcus Luttrell, when I asked him the question, he said, when we are taught to take that hill and we're not allowed to take that hill, that's a demotivator. We've been trained for years to do this. Let us go do it. Mm-hmm. Point us, say, go do it the way you've been trained, and go do it. When you say, there's that hill, by the way, put one arm behind your back, do this, and I don't want to get political and all that because I don't know the ins and outs. However, I started thinking about our football team. Okay, wait a minute now. They're highly trained people, I think as highly trained as anybody in the world at playing the game of football. Yet, is the culture clear? Are there sound bites that during the heat of the moment, during their battle on the football field, is it clear about what we expect? And that's when me and you got together and I said, wait a minute now. If our coaches can't regurgitate it, if our players can't, if they're not the sound bites, then we're in error here. And we have to be, the clarity must be so clear, as we said, to a player, he's going to push it away. To a coach, it's called insubordination, you have to leave.
So I'm just remembering what we did and how hard we worked at it.
Great memories.
We did these. We'd start at 6 a.m. and this with the coaching staff. And I remember you initially, and this is pull back the curtain a little bit. And I think you know this about yourself. I hope you know this about yourself. You're always in a hurry. I mean, let's go. The number of times I heard that at Ohio State football from you, and sometimes it was the appropriate thing to do, and candidly,
sometimes it wasn't.
Sometimes it wasn't. So this was one of those where you wanted the training, you wanted me to teach the coaches, you wanted to learn yourself, but you wanted to, and then I remember after the first session, you said, let's keep it about 45 minutes. We got 45 minutes in, I looked at you and you were relaxed. I remember your glasses were on the bridge of your nose, your pen was out, and you said, keep going. We went for like 90 minutes. And then the next time, again, 90, and then, we went deep and long. And our message to the coaches, and the reason I'm sharing this with you, the audience, is we've got executives who are listening. We've got administrators of schools who are listening. You have to train your leadership team to become great leaders. That if you're the CEO or you're the principal or you're the general manager or you're a superintendent or you're a head coach, the people who report to you have more contact points with the team than you do. And this was, I think, and I want you to give your perspective on this, because when I saw you recognize, wait a second, I don't have as much contact with the linebackers as Luke Fickell does.
Right.
So if the linebackers are going to be crystal clear about the purpose and the culture and buy into it, that's a Luke Fickell job, not an Urban Meyer job. And so we trained each coach, each unit leader at Ohio State football, 9 coaches, to be elite at building culture and trust with the guys that they led. There was a shift.
Well, think about what you just said. You want to build culture. How do you build culture if they're not clear what exactly it is? And then how do you build trust if you don't really understand what trust means and what trust stands for? Yeah. So we went to work and, without making it sound greater than it was, that was one of the greatest moments in my career. That was a time where, once again, all credit, you give credit to the people, and there's going to be some great stories come up here in a minute of complete, absolute transformation of coaches and leaders on our team.
Well, that brings up this incredibly important principle of the relationship between culture and strategy. And I think one of the big mistakes everyone makes in organizations and teams is they separate culture and strategy. They're not separate. In fact, the purpose of culture is to generate and sustain the behavior called for by the strategy. That's the purpose of culture. And it's interesting, once strategy has been crafted and communicated, success is a matter of execution. Agreed?
Absolutely.
Execution is a culture thing, not a strategy thing. And I think that's a mistake that everybody, or not everybody, but the elite don't make that mistake. Like you mentioned, the Navy SEALs, they understand the power of culture in executing the mission. And so you train, you strategize, but there's this belief system, this inner belief that is inviolate, it's DNA, and that's the job of culture. And yeah, you two teams meet, same level of talent, same strategy. Who wins? The team with the strongest culture. And so getting that cultural message to every single person in the organization and on the team, their unit leader has to be the communicator of the culture.
Okay, that's incredible information. Now, let's go back to Marcus Luttrell. And I guess the challenge to people listening, the challenge for me as a coach for 17 years back, this was probably year 12 of my career, could I really ask people in my organization what was the culture? I knew what it was. I had a vision of what I wanted. When you say relentless effort, I wanted us to play harder and faster than anybody we played against. I wanted us to practice harder than everyone else, so when your number's called, you make the play. That's called competitive excellence. Yep. I wanted the most powerful form of motivation within our organization is called love. It's called power of unit. And so I wanted those three areas. I had that vision. However, until our conversation and you on the plane to Vegas there and you started diagramming, I still remember it. I still have it. What is the culture blueprint? And so a lot of times when I have conversations, especially with young coaches, or I get asked to go speak in the corporate America, what is your culture? And I told you a minute ago, I usually get some mission statement. And I said, let me go ask yourself, if I go walk through your organization, I ask people within, what is the culture of our organization? Will they answer it with the sound bites that you want them to answer it with? It's amazingly, I never hear the answer yes. Mm-hmm. I hear, well, it's on the wall. However, is it ingrained in part of your DNA?
So that's an interesting metaphor. So for culture to make a difference to performance, it can't be on the wall. It has to be on human hearts.
Has to be.
Most organizations don't have core values. They have poster values.
Well, what I'm finding out, too, there's a lot of it nowadays, it's political correct values. It's values that I'm not saying they're wrong, they're absolutely right, but what does that have to do with performance? Yeah. Why is that up there? It sounds good, I'm CYAN, and I get it, I understand that. However, is it really part of the sound bite? I know we can keep going, but do you remember when Major Harris, I believe it was Major Harris, stood up and he said, when contact is made, and there will be contact, that means adversity is going to hit us. The enemy is going to show up. Now, what is the enemy? Obviously, great respect for our military. We don't do that in football. However, at some point, you're going to look across you, and there's someone going to try to defeat you. When contact is made, you go back to your training. What training are you giving them, and is there a great clarity of purpose in your training?
And what we're saying is the power resides in the training strategically and culturally between the technical X's and O's execution of your football position in the context of the play and this deep belief inside of you about how to do that. And when you have crystal clarity around strategy and crystal clarity around culture and you love each other, that's where you get where you get elite performance. And in order to do that, you need a system for the strategy and for the culture. And you need to do the work to build the skill because you do one rep at the 3 technique, you're not going to be a great D lineman. How many reps do you need to be a great quarterback, a receiver? Tons of same thing with the culture. So what we did was we put the culture down into this very powerful, simple but powerful template. 3 elements. What do we believe? How do we behave? What outcome are we going to produce? Belief, behavior, outcome. That's the blueprint. That's the playbook. BBO. And not complex. And so, for example, that BBO for effort was called relentless effort was the belief. The behaviors go 4 to 6 seconds, point A to point B, as hard as you can go. And the outcome we get if we did that is we'd be tougher than any situation or opponent we faced.
Wow.
Now think about that. What do we believe? We believe in relentless effort. What's that look like? What do I do driven by that belief? I go 4 to 6, A to B, as hard as I can go. What outcome do we get? If we all do that, we're tougher than any situation or any opponent we face. Is that clear? Crystal. Now, how do we get that message?
Okay, you have a concept or you have a core. I should say a core, and that's relentless effort. Yeah. You got a visual or a sound bite.
4 to 6 A to B.
4 to 6 A to B, and for the people listening, 4 to 6 is the length of a play in college football. Yeah. 4 to 6 seconds of a play. And that came up with a visual of 3 decades plus coaching. I have never been in a game where the team that didn't play the hardest didn't win. Mm-hmm. And it's time tested. That's going to be long before us, long after us. The team that plays the hardest wins the game. Now, some people, and I see young coaches, well, we're going to work on throwing the ball, and, maybe the team that throws for the most yardage will win. That's not a time-tested. That's a subjective. That's, to be honest with you, it's absolute nonsense in the game of football. That has no bearing on who's going to win the game. Who's going to win the game? Who plays the hardest? How do we give them a sound bite? 4 to 6, A to B. And then, like you said, what does that look like? What will that sound like? At the end of the game, we can defeat every opponent, every situation that we come in contact with.
Now, we trained the coaches to do that. And we required them to do that. And we helped them to do that.
We'll go one step further. I went to each meeting room, and we reorganized meeting rooms. Yep. Because today, the messaging that goes on in this world right now is phenomenal. It's called cell phones. It's called media. It's called, this, subliminal messaging that everywhere you look, you see this. I changed the whole facility, and I wanted it within every office, every person, everybody just constantly on the TVs. We're reteaching the culture of Ohio State football, and we're being with great clarity. And it's 4 to 6, A to B, and examples of it, and then competitive excellence, and then also power of the unit. So
the other piece of that, though, which we know to be true about leadership is your players, the people that you lead, have to trust you in order to buy into that message. And this is a really important message. Man, this is so true. I have to buy into you before I buy into the message. People follow the leader first and the vision second. They follow the leader first and the culture second. People will not follow and buy into a culture unless they buy into the manager or supervisor who leads them. So the messenger, initially, the supervisor, the manager, the superintendent, the head coach, the assistant coach, whoever is delivering the cultural message, if that person doesn't have trust, that message ain't getting through.
Think about back in the 80s. I don't know if that was always necessarily true. I followed my coach because I was horrified by him, and he's a coach.
Right.
And when he says you jump, you say how high. Same thing with being a parent.
Yeah.
There's got to be some trust. And nowadays, and you can complain about the new generation, because I remember when I was young right here about the old generation, new gen. But this is a fact. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, there was a time where you did it because your teacher said do it.
Yeah.
There's a time that the coach said you jump, and you said how high, and I don't, is it right or wrong? I'm doing it because that's the leader. There's also a time when parents said, hey, you do this. Yes, I'm going to do it because you're a parent. I don't know. Of course I know. There has to be that trust. Yeah. And I think it's always been there, but never more than this generation, than this time of our lives right now in 2019. If they don't trust you, you have a hard time getting to convince people how to walk out that door.
So I grew up in the same environment. I mean, I'm older than you slightly, but who's older, you or me?
Yeah, you're much older.
Okay, right, thanks. So that was the era that I grew up in as well, is you were told what to do, you did it. Now, I do wonder what would have happened if they'd been better trust builders back then. What could we have achieved? So here's the message in trust, and this is what we taught to the coaches. 3 dimensions. People trust you because they have repeated experience of your behavior in 3 categories. People will trust you because of repeated experience of your behavior in 3. Trust is earned, not given. Trust is earned by your behavior, not given by your position.
Yep.
Character, competence, connection are the 3 categories that you have to behave in to earn the trust to lead someone. Character is ethical trust, which is consistent behavior of you doing what you say you're going to do. You living the culture and being honest and open, and if you say it, you follow through on it. That's character, ethical trust. Repeated experience of that behavior. Number 2 is competence. Now, a little bit different than what people may think, but competence trust is earned when I have repeated experience of you helping me get better. So it's not just knowing the work or knowing the job, it's how you use what you know on behalf of someone else. So you can be competent and self-oriented. That's not the competence trust we're talking about. This is competent and others-oriented. And particularly in leadership in an organization or a school or an athletic program, I want a leader who makes me better. So it's competence in teaching and in mentoring and in helping someone get better. And it includes solving problems and getting stuff done. And the third one is a biggie, and that is connection. And that is repeated experience of you caring about me, listening to me, and connecting with things that are important to me. Think of the power of those. And we taught that. But how many sessions do we do with this?
Well, we first started with one, and then we had to keep going. And once again, I give credit to those coaches. They couldn't get enough. The best coaches on the staff were the ones to this day still utilizing those skills taught to them. Yeah. Also, the best leaders are the ones that can't get enough because they see this helping them. This sees them, and you mentioned character, competence, connection. And the one thing that you would always add to that, and I still to this day, is you are never measured by your intentions. Who doesn't, want to be a leader of character? Who doesn't? However, your intentions. And in our world, the character flaw that shows up quite often, you talk too much as a coach. I'm going to play you 10 plays in this game if you do this. You work so hard to build up your character with this player, and then all of a sudden he doesn't play in that game. All that work's gone. He just lost confidence and trust in you. Yeah. The competency part, you're not measured by your intentions. I want to be the greatest strategy execution of teaching a player how to play his position. And however, one unprepared meeting, one unprepared practice 10-minute segment where you're not organized, you have an elite player looks at you like, why am I doing this? This is unorganized. All that work is gone. The competency part is gone. And then the most difficult piece to get is a connection piece. And we worked on character. We worked on competence. However, we took it to the nth degree because after every interview I had with players and coaches in that organization in January of 14, we had a connection issue. We had that care issue that we had to fix.
And you make this great point that we emphasize is we judge ourselves by our intentions. Others judge us by how they experience us.
Right.
And we re-engineered the coach-player relationship. I shouldn't say we did. We gave our coaches the tools, and they did. And I think to Luke, remember Luke Fickle, after session number 1, he came to me and said, can we meet one-on-one? He wanted individual one-on-one coaching for me on how to apply this stuff. And he was, and I said, let's check with Coach Meyer and get your approval, and it was awesome.
I remember putting this leadership group together of members of our team, and it became such a elite group that others wanted to be part of it. It became a fight for how do I become part of this, because they were getting this training that you could see behavior changes on our team. You could see a guy like Curtis Grant, who will go down as one of the great leaders in Ohio State football history. I would not speak to Curtis at the Orange Bowl the year before. I would not allow him in certain meetings the year before because he was part of a team and he was given zero value. He was a phony. He was not contributing, and he had the skill set to contribute. As a matter of fact, he was a powerful leader, but in a negative form. He was a complainer. He was it wasn't his fault that he didn't play it down. A matter of fact, and I'm the special teams coach, I would not allow him in those meetings because he didn't bring value. And I didn't want his attitude in that room. A transformation, giving credit to Coach Fickle, working with you and reshaping his connection piece with the players, Curtis Grant became the voice of the 2014 national champion Buckeyes. How did that happen? Mm-hmm. That's as illogical as Cardell Jones, a third-string quarterback, winning the championship. And for the shallow of mind, which we've all been there, for the shallow of heart, man, the kid really turned his life around. No, do you realize, and you say this quite often, do you realize the amount of work and effort that went into that transformation? Yet, as we said a few minutes earlier, the rewards are historical.
Mm-hmm. I think of that trust triad, the 3 dimensions of trust, and how it works every place. It's not just college football. It's everything. It's true in a bank. It's true in a hospital. It's true in a school. It's true in a marriage, a friendship, that we trust somebody based on our experience of their character, their competence, and their connection. And so the message that I would close with for everyone listening is, this isn't a football story. This is a life story. This is about how life works. And every organization has a culture. And I want to challenge you as you're listening to this, in your organization, have you made your culture exceptionally clear? Are the beliefs clear? Are the behaviors clear? And are the outcomes that you're pursuing crystal clear? And is it clear because you have equipped every leader in your leadership network to own their own behavior and be a trustworthy leader through character, competence, and connection? And then do they communicate that culture with exceptional clarity over and over and over again until there's just zero confusion about what those cultural standards are? That's a great challenge that we all have. And I think about that 2014 season, and maybe we'll roll this over to the next episode, is it didn't start the way we'd hoped. I mean, we're talking about all this training, which we did in the offseason, and then Braxton Miller gets injured. And JT Barrett comes in, and we play Navy, and we don't play very well.
And then the unthinkable happens.
And then we play Virginia Tech at home, and we lose. Despite all the work we did, we were confronted with a need to elevate and live the culture at a level I'm not sure we had anticipated we needed to, but that's what needed to happen. So let's pick that up next time. I mean, it's a great example and story of a journey, a leadership journey, a culture journey. And it was like you say, what's going to go down in history as one of the great stories of college football. But that's next time. So everybody listen carefully to this. Again, go back and replay the pieces that are most meaningful for you. Culture is not built by what you proclaim. Culture is built by what you practice, you promote, and you permit. And that requires that leaders communicate it, that leaders live the culture, and they build trust through character, competence, and connection. Go do the work.